Good morning and welcome to Becky's Bible Thoughts, our chance to dig into God's Word a few times a week in less than 10 minutes. So I was recently reading in the book of Isaiah in the Old Testament in the Bible, and this passage caught my eye. It's found in Isaiah chapter 29, verses 5 and 6, and this is what it says. Suddenly, in an instant, the Lord of heaven's armies will act for you, with thunder and earthquake and great noise, with whirlwind and storm and consuming fire. Now, this follows on from a few verses which talk about the disaster that Jerusalem is going to face. It talks about the people of that city and that land being brought low, being overrun by enemies and siege towers, completely destroyed. But then suddenly, in an instant, the Lord of heaven's armies enters the scene and acts for his people with power so great that it can only be described in terms of the most powerful things that we can imagine: thunder and earthquake and storm and consuming fire. All of those incredibly powerful things which still pale in comparison to the all-consuming power of our God. Suddenly, God acts. I think that's quite a common thing that he does, a common way of working for God. It can seem like nothing is happening in our lives, maybe even like God is against us in what we're trying to do, and then suddenly, in an instant, everything changes. Everything turns around, and we can't believe that we even doubted for a second that God was going to come through for us. So on the same day that I read that verse in Isaiah, I was also reading in the book of John in my daily reading plan for the year, and I came across the story of Lazarus' death. Lazarus' sisters, Mary and Martha, had specifically sent for Jesus to let him know that his friend, their brother, was very sick, that he was dying. And I can only imagine how they must have felt when they sent that message. They knew that Jesus could do great miracles. They knew that he had healed people. They'd seen his power at work, and they must have believed that he was on his way. You know, I can only imagine waking up every morning for the next couple of days and staring out of the window, imagining that every footstep you heard was Jesus approaching, ready to heal your brother. Only those footsteps weren't Jesus. They were just a passing neighbor. That shadow darkening the door wasn't Jesus. It was just someone checking in on how the family were doing. And then on one fateful day, Lazarus breathed his last. The mourning sisters wrapped him up in burial clothes and placed his body in a tomb. Their hearts pierced all the more, knowing that if Jesus had come, their brother would still be alive. Well, Jesus does arrive 4 days after Lazarus had died and was buried. Lord, if only you had been here, my brother would not have died, Mary says to God on earth as she weeps with a crowd of people. And then the suddenly comes. After days of hoping and grieving, of wondering and waiting, of feeling frustration and anger and pain, Jesus enters the scene, and suddenly Lazarus is up and walking around. Suddenly, Joseph finds himself in prison for years, forgotten in the darkness, and then suddenly he is promoted to second in command of the entire nation of Egypt. Saul is a persecutor of Christians, bent on gathering as many as he can to stop this new threat, until suddenly he has an encounter with Jesus. Moses is a shepherd in the wilderness, the hopes for his life long forgotten. And suddenly there's a burning bush and a fresh calling to rescue his people. For in eternity there was nothing. And suddenly God spoke, and there was light, and there was life, and it was good. God works in suddenlies. If it feels like nothing is happening in your life right now, if you feel like God is far away and the thing that you've been praying for is being ignored, please, please don't give up. You don't know how close to your suddenly you might be. God's timing is perfect. And sometimes it means there's a wait for us in the ministry that we've been called to, or in the promise that we're so desperately clinging on to. But suddenly, in an instant, he can change everything. Keep believing, keep praying, keep hoping, keep trusting in God and in his promises, because your suddenly may be just around the corner. Thank you so much for joining me here today. Please do keep on going, keep on pushing. You have no idea of how amazing the plans God has are for your life. I'll be here again next week. So please do join me for more thoughts from the Bible every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. Thank you, and I'll see you then.